We built up empires. We stole countries. That's what you do. That's how you build an empire. We stole countries with the cunning use of flags. Yeah. You just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. And they go, you can't claim us, we live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag? We don't need a bloody flag. It's our country, you bastard. No flag, no country. You can't have one. That's the rules that I've just made up.
Now, I'm not suggesting that in pharma we necessarily make up the rules, and I'm not suggesting that we try and drive global communications by using a flag, but I also think there's things that we can revisit and perhaps we can learn. I also never expected to open a presentation at an event like this and have a picture of Napoleon, Augustus, or Khan, but I think it's worth reflecting on what they were trying to achieve in terms of a global domination and really kind of uniting the world and bringing people together. One of the byproducts of their endeavours is that we end up with a world with very different politics, religions, cultures, and what we end up with is a world with very, very different contexts. And I want to just reflect on that and introduce you to a couple of profiles that I'm going to use, personas, throughout the presentation. So first of all, we have Leos. He's Brazilian. He loves his God, Christianity. Up until the semi-final of the World Cup, he loved football. He's a tour guide. He's very proud of his country. But he's politically active and slightly unhappy. He's frustrated with the corruption of his government. He's frustrated that they're choosing to invest in things like the World Cup and the Olympics when perhaps they should be invested in infrastructure and healthcare. It's quite relevant to him because he's a big family man and he lives with his elderly mother who unfortunately suffers with COPD. When we go to the other side of the world, we've got Yuki, who's done incredibly well in a very male-dominated society to be an oncologist. She's incredibly driven. She very much cares about her patients. She's quite isolated from her family. She doesn't necessarily love sport or perhaps religion. And then we come on to Isha, who's in the UK. So she's a blogger. She works for online magazines talking about fashion. She's of Bangladeshi descent. She primarily works from home and she suffers with psoriasis. Like many people with psoriasis, she's frustrated, she's perhaps angry, and she struggles to really talk with a doctor. These are taking it more at a holistic level. If we look at Leos and the differences between these individuals, he's frustrated by his government, the lack of investment in healthcare. Isha, she's isolated from society, ironically by technology that allows her to work from home. If we look at Yuki, she's determined to change the status quo, both in terms of her society and what women are doing, but also in terms of healthcare and improving it for her patients. These are three people you're probably much more likely to recognise. We have, obviously, the late Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and also, does anyone know who the guy is on the far side? He's more interested in his customers than shareholders, and is perfect. So on the far side, we have Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO of Amazon, who we heard about this morning from Ian, and his absolute focus on the customer experience. What these three people have achieved, in my opinion, is, with their contemporaries, global domination. What they've actually succeeded in doing is aligning our expectations and the way we behave. They've brought us together in a way that the other people perhaps had not. So what does that mean when we start to look at our personas and we start to look for commonalities in their behavior? If we go back to Leos, he doesn't have a laptop, he doesn't have a desktop, he doesn't have a tablet, he does everything through a smartphone. We look at the penetration in Latin America of smartphones, it's going to double in the next 3 years. For his business, he uses email, Facebook Messenger, perhaps even WhatsApp to communicate and arrange the tour guides with his customers. He also uses Instagram and Facebook to market his services and get a lot of likes. He's very active in terms of political on Twitter, having learnt from the Arab Spring in 2010, and he's found some really interesting information sources as a byproduct of that. And occasionally he talks about things like biopharma and organisations, global organisations that could do a little bit more. If we go through to Yuki, she actually has, from a hardware point of view, she's got a desktop, she's got a phablet produced by Samsung. She uses M3, who most people will know have taken over doctors.net. They have tremendous penetration in Japan. It's in excess of 80%. I think it's probably nearer to 90%. And she uses that to access different information and shape her medical knowledge. She also uses tools like Mixi and Line from a social point of view. Line has 50 million users. It's how she connects with her friends. It bears more than a passing resemblance to Facebook in having the homepage and the timeline. And she banks using HSBC. When we go back to Aisha, she's got all range of different hardware. She's got the tablet, she's got the smartphone, she's got the computer. She is a prolific online shopper. She's doing things like Ocado, Tesco, Amazon. She's frustrated that the one thing that she can't buy online really are the clothes, which is the biggest frustration when we talk about things like psoriasis. She uses Pinterest for work. She uses Instagram from a personal point of view. She connects with her family in Bangladesh, most likely through things like FaceTime. My question to pharma, and I guess the people in this room, is that clearly we recognise that people around the world are different because of their context, their geography, perhaps things like politics and current affairs. But are we also recognising that how they behave the same and how we can leverage that to improve outcomes? And that really is what I want to talk about over the next 20 minutes, and that kind of consistency, and not necessarily propose solutions, but really ask some questions about how we operate as a business, carrying on from what the guy said this morning. When we start to look at the services and the tools that they use, the Zooms, the Fitbits, things like Pick and Facebook, what you'll notice is there's a commonality in terms of the behaviour. So they're using things for banking, fitness, social. So the applications might be called something different, but the services and the behaviours are the same. I'm not going to bore you with stats. Everyone's got loads of them, but I'm just going to do one which I found and I thought was really interesting. I didn't in a million years think that the internet usage in Germany and Kenya would be the same. 3 hours. So this concept of the developed world being more online than other markets, for me, is very quickly becoming outdated. So how did this happen? There are certain rules in terms of what we do, and what are those rules? First off, in 200 countries, the like symbol is recognized. Beyond that, we have things like hashtags and we have @. These are absolutely part of the global vocab. They're not English, they're not French, they're not Mandarin. They're a language that everyone recognizes. Paperclip, home, we're all familiar with them. My question really is, how well can farmers speak digital? And I love this quote from Ludwig. The limits of my language means the limits of my world. And I think that's really, really relevant to pharma in terms of what we're actually doing and how we move forward. But it's not just about the language and the vocab. It's also about user experience. It really doesn't matter which country in the world you're in. If there's a TV, most likely a remote control will look something like this. What happens is we become conditioned, and what Apple, Facebook, Instagram, Amazon, what they've done is they've conditioned our expectations and a way of behaving and a way of interacting. Microsoft have ignored this. So this is Windows 8. It's been so rejected, they're going to skip 9 and go straight to 10. Go on Facebook, have a look at I hate Windows 8. What Microsoft did is show a real arrogance and a disregard for the expectations of their users and what we would think of as an iterative development. So we have the rules and the language, and we have behaviours that are becoming increasingly consistent. There are also really common needs, and this builds on the conversation of this morning. I think Uber's pretty special. It doesn't matter about your religion, your politics, where you exist in the world. Fundamentally, you have to get from A to B. What Uber have done is provide a universal, accepted and needed service. The byproduct is they launched in 2009. They're currently valued at 15 billion, and they get 1 million requests a week from all over the world, from all different walks of life, to get people from A to B. It's a universal service that goes beyond typical borders. We then go to Airbnb. They have so far booked 10 million nights. I worked it out, that's 28,000 years worth of booking, because they are providing a service that is of real value across the globe, as again, whatever your walk of life. Most people in this room will use Dropbox. Again, really, really simple, valuable service that complements my ecosystem and helps me get by in my life. Again, irrelevant of what kind of stakeholder I might be. And then we have an example from healthcare. So it's not just booking a taxi, which I know it's that easy to use consumer examples, and it's not just about booking a hotel room. Fitbit is an example of a tool and a service that complements all of our personal ecosystems and makes our life that little bit better. I've just got another video to play that talks this through.
Every step you take, every goal you set, every choice you make to be active adds up to a healthier, more awesome you. Flex encourages you to get out and move every day. By keeping your stats synced to Fitbit's mobile and online tools automatically in real time. It's the perfect companion to your lifestyle. It reminds you to make little changes that go a long way. So you can show your friends what's up and crush your goals. Flex keeps you connected to your fitness goals whenever you're active. And even when you're not. helping you sleep better and feel better. Flex from Fitbit.
And then finally there's a goal, and this is what I talk about when I mention things about good pharma and trying to improve outcomes. When I talk about a shared ambition, it's not to find where Wally is. Wherever you are in the world, whatever kind of stakeholder you are, whether you're a pharmacist, whether you're a payer, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a specialist, patient, carer, we all share the same goal, and it's to try and improve outcomes. And what it does is it unites us as an industry and aligns us with the stakeholders that really count. But it's not just a soft, nice to have. I think it's a critical business strategy. When we look at the focus on outcomes, 50% of US insurers expect our outcome-based contracts by 2015. We look at the initiatives taking place in Germany, and basically across the world, it's not necessarily about driving treatments, it's about improving outcomes. And that allows us as communicators, marketers, and innovators to really make a meaningful difference. And what do I mean by that? You know, back in the days, and it wasn't too long ago, it was about taking our treatment A versus treatment B, and we would do communications and we would maximize the scientific difference and we would position it appropriately for the market, and it would help us drive market share. Now, of course, that is still critical to what we're doing, but so is providing improved services that are going to help the patient in their treatment and make a real difference. And it's through doing this and providing those services we can build brand equity and loyalty and hopefully drive market share while simultaneously making a difference in patients' lives. I love this quote, I use it all the time. We try never to forget that medicine is for the people, it is not for the profits. The profits follow, and if we've remembered that, they have never failed to appear. The better we have remembered it, the larger they have been. This was made in 1950. I think it will be just as relevant when we get through to 2050. So, where does that put us? We have a universal value. We're completely aligned with our stakeholders and our customers about wanting to improve outcomes. If you develop customer-focused, valuable services, as the conversations this morning took place, they will be globally adopted. And it's relatively straightforward because we have a consistent language and we have consistent behaviors and we have consistent rules as a byproduct of the success of Google, Facebook, Amazon, and PayPal. So with these building blocks, my question to the industry and the people in this room is, do we need to shake things up? How can we approach what we do different, be more bold, more courageous, and really try and transform what we're doing? So I've just got 5 points to work through, and these are not necessarily recommendations, they're questions that to hopefully prompt debate and discussion and maybe reconsider some of the things that we do. The first is, do we need a new business model for a new world? I've been in this industry for 15 years, I've enjoyed it. One of my frustrations is that during that time when we've restructured or changed our focus, it typically means we appoint a new e-business manager, or perhaps we set up 2 or 3 people as a digital team, or we might go crazy and set up an innovation lab. During those 15 years, I've gone from making a phone call on my phone to living my life through it. There's been a complete and utter technical revolution, yet we have stayed largely the same. So if we take that as a point, what can we learn and how can we drive that forward? I absolutely believe in healthcare and pharma, that there are incredibly passionate and innovative people, and we have some amazing ideas that would have a huge impact. Unfortunately, once we've had those ideas, the next conversation is typically, what about going at enterprise level? How can this be easily rolled out? What about efficiencies and costs? And what happens is that we go from this point of being really inspired to having to put loads of sweat in, and we lose some of the excitement and some of the potential impacts. We probably go from spending loads of money to perhaps not investing as much. And my question is, how can we create a more iterative, agile, and courageous model? What can we learn from those companies I spoke about before, about trying and failing, and trying again, and just being much more agile and iterative and courageous and bold and trying to change the way that we work? And I've got an example to provide this. So Kemper, founded in 1975, very much the establishment when it comes to shoes. They know the game, they've got the t-shirt, they've been around, tremendous insight, they don't need to learn a lot. They've got 400 stores, they've got 1,000 employees. They're against Tom's, who were founded less than 10 years ago, not so many stores, not as many employees, and they've got £70 million extra in turnover. So perhaps they've not got the heritage, might not have all of the insight and the knowledge, they might not have all the rigor, but from a commercial point of view, they've got a fresh approach and it's making a real difference. And what can we learn from that? So while I say it's great to have consumer examples, I also really want to have healthcare-related examples. Is anyone familiar with the concepts of play to cure? If not, prepare to be really impressed. So I just think this is brilliant. So this was done by Cancer UK, and their approach was going, as scientists, there is a huge amount of genetic data to get through when we're looking at tissue samples. It takes a phenomenal amount of time, effort, and resource, and those scientists could spend their time better elsewhere. So they came up with this gamification idea. It's a mobile app, it's brilliant, download it, play it, do your bit to cure cancer. What happens is you go through a few levels with fictitious data. You then actually get access to play the game with real-life patient data, and we diagnose it through the game that we play. It uses the law of averages, so when they have 10,000 people all in agreement, they take that as a confirmed answer. My frustration with this is, why did this have to be a charity that did this? Why wasn't it pharma, with their investment and their insight, who could have produced something to have a real impact? And again, I've just got a video to show you.
Spaceships, asteroids, and space dust. Not the usual checklist to beat cancer. Until now. Genes in Space is a new pioneering mobile phone game which genuinely helps scientists in their mission to beat cancer sooner. And here's the clever bit. As you steer through the galaxy collecting a valuable space dust dubbed Element Alpha, you are simultaneously identifying critical faults in real gene data. What takes scientists hours can now be done in minutes with your help and the collective force of thousands of players. And the more players we have, the quicker we get results and bring forward the day when all cancers are cured. You don't have to wear a lab coat to help beat cancer sooner.
For me, that absolutely has to be our ambition, and that is what we've got to be achieving. And I'm not convinced we have an excuse why we shouldn't be doing that. But how did they actually do this? So ignore the Facebook and Google. They brought together over a weekend over 50 developers, software engineers, UX specialists, put them with scientists, with medical professionals. We brought them together over a weekend, and they did a hackathon, which is basically the concept of hacking loads of stuff up and throwing it together and seeing what you come up with. They came up with 12 prototypes, one of which was play to cure. So a very different approach to our usual, it's going to take 18 weeks and we'll get to what we think we're going to get to because of our process. A really different and fresh approach. The next question, perhaps a little bit more provocative, is it time to redraw the map? So what do I mean by this? I find it kind of interesting that an organisation perhaps that would market a treatment in oncology and say infectious disease would group their countries in the same way. Clearly the landscape for oncology versus infectious disease on a global scale is very, very different. What we're doing, again building on the talks this morning, is we're setting up our business based on operations. We're almost being Tesco when we should be focused on the customer. And is there potentially a competitive advantage if we do have a different map for different markets? As Dr. Daniel Vasella of Novartis said, we must rethink all assumptions from innovation to marketing to sales and promotion. I absolutely agree with that. This is not a reflection of any particular company. It's more of a generalization of where we exist at the moment in pharma. So we take a global team, we have the scientific platform, makes sense. The science is the science is the science. Build a brand identity. Of course, it's got to be global in terms of what it represents. And then we have the creative. Interesting considering some of the building blocks I spoke to about before in terms of different people's context and appreciation, the scenarios and their agendas. Then there's typically a grey area around digital. Who's going to do the strategy? Who's going to do the local execution? Who owns it? Where does the build take place? And then we have the local market. I also love a slight irony with this. So we have a very centralized approach, a global approach to doing a creative. It's great. We get smart strategy people, smart creative people on it, and of course there is an efficiency because we're not doing it multiple times, so we're saving money. Simultaneously, we're spending millions on closed-loop marketing to deliver tailored messages to individuals. For me, there's got to be a smarter approach to this in the way that we bring these two together. Of course, we can't have a creative for every different market, and of course, there is a value in terms of driving a relevant conversation with a physician. But do we need to rethink how we deliver this, and can we bring them two together? Are we identifying the right efficiencies, or is there a smarter way to work? So just throwing it out there, I don't think this has perhaps worked from a realistic point of view, but we should always consider these things. Would it make sense that a global team is responsible for defining the scientific platform, for building a brand identity, and perhaps for thinking about the services? So we spoke about the services being universal. Someone suffering with oncology in one market needs the same service as someone in a different market. Same with an oncologist. Perhaps they should be the global initiatives. Should the cultural team actually be responsible for creating the creative and telling the story? Should it be that there are multiple cultural teams and actually the local market can make a choice of who they're going to work with? And their responsibility is driving relationships with the local prosumers, as I like to talk about. And I'll come back to that in a sec. The next thing is about the ecosystem. So I love this concept of a personal ecosystem. I know my ecosystem. I know where I use my emails, my shopping, my banking, my fitness, my social activity. And I'm pretty certain that everyone in this room has very similar ecosystems. And I'm fairly certain that if I was in Brazil, Japan, they would also be very similar. They're only going to become more intrinsic to our everyday life. They're only going to become more successful. They're verging on becoming almost a tattoo and an extension of our identity. So how can we as pharma exist within this ecosystem and share in that success and that integration with people's lives? What we can't do is be king. We can't be Microsoft saying, we're big pharma, we know best, this is an all-in-one solution, it's not going to work. We need to play nicely. We need to recognize that there is an ecosystem, there are services, there's a consistency in the way they behave and the language that they use, and we need to work within it and identify where we can add the most value and be friendly pharma, which is a nice idea. So, we've heard an amazing amount about Jeff Bezos. The success we have had over the past 12 years has been driven exclusively by customer experience. We start with customers, figure out what they want, and figure out how to get it to them. He is targeting the wider consumer population. He's selling everything from books to garden furniture. We're just dealing with stakeholders in healthcare and patients and families. It's much easier for us to identify the needs that they have and be able to provide services that make sense. Really, what are we trying to do? We're trying to improve outcomes. We're trying to take our patients on a journey from A to B and help them along that way, creating services that are going to exist within this ecosystem and in doing so, drive our own commercial success while improving patient outcomes. Which brings me on to this. It's all very well me stood up here going, let's improve outcomes and it'll drive our commercial success. But we're marketers and we're communicators and we're brand managers and we're IT. So how actually do we improve outcomes? We're not necessarily the scientists who are creating the treatments. I like Dave Brailsford. So he is the performance director of British Cycling and also for Sky Team in the Tour de France. And he's been phenomenally successful, winning it multiple times, getting loads and loads of gold medals. His concept is really simple. It's about identifying every single 1% and trying to improve outcomes. So I don't believe we're necessarily looking to cure cancer. I think what we're looking to do is support the patient and the oncologist on that journey and try and drive those 1%. An example of that is the importance of our psychological state and where we are in our mind. So here's my Roman poet, a sound mind in a sound body. So how might that look and what can we do? I've shared this case study before, but I think it's worth reflecting on. It was done by a brilliant product design agency called Idaho. It was done in Minnesota. They were invited into a hospital to see if they could improve patients' mental state and as a byproduct of that, improve outcomes. The hospital fully expected to invest a huge amount in this and perhaps completely restructure the way they treated the patients. The reality was lots and lots and lots of 1% that made a real difference. So if we take the one on the far side at the top, the first thing that happens is patients get wheeled around the hospital. The frustration with that is they can't see the porter who's pushing them around. It makes them uncomfortable. So they stuck some wing mirrors on the side of the bed so there was a more personal relationship with the porter and they could have a conversation. They also spend a lot of time looking at sterile ceilings. So they put some beautiful pieces of art on the roof. They were uncomfortable, these patients who had been rolled around the hospital, because they didn't know if they're in public areas or private areas, and it made them uneasy. So they changed the carpeting and the flooring so they would always know if it was private or if it was public. And then they allowed people to write really personalised and positive messages on the wall. Lots and lots and lots of 1% that we could all achieve that help us to improve outcomes and build brand loyalty and equity. The next is more provocative. Can winning in low-income markets be the key to success in high-income markets? As it stands at the moment, as I understand it, we typically focus on the markets that may or may not represent the biggest commercial benefit to us as an organisation. Perhaps we also factor in different things like operations and society. I'm so sure we are. I believe there's a broader criteria that we should now start to look at and other questions we should be asking ourselves. And why do I think this? Because of this concept of the 21st century prosumer, and in that I very much include the healthcare professional. The guy who is informed, who finds information sources he trusts, who forms an opinion, and is then connected and empowered to share that with other people. He is key to us, and we need to build relationships. Now, he does not need to exist in a particular country. He doesn't need to be in a high-value market. He could be anywhere. He's that scientific leader. In 2010, there was the Arab Spring. So, as everyone in this room will be aware, social media in Egypt was a catalyst to really overthrow a government. Does that make a market like Egypt increasingly relevant in what we're doing? If we were to support and really partner and focus and prioritize Egypt, could they become a real global advocate and ambassador? Could they help to drive a positive sentiment around the work that we're doing? I refuse to believe a healthcare professional dismisses a scientific leader because of their passport. And does that mean to think we need to rethink about how we prioritize markets? And really, just to build on that, is there a possibility of us driving the global medical debate to not just include necessarily science, but also a social responsibility and a morality which can be supported by driving success in cures in low markets? And where this really brings me to is 5 points for people to take away and discuss and hopefully consider some of interest and value. Is it the right time? It must be, as we've heard a lot this morning, to adopt new business techniques and work in a different way. And I hope I've suggested some ways that you could do that with a more agile and more iterative approach. Is there a competitive advantage in redrawing the map and revisiting how we group societies and individuals? We have to make sure we exist within this personal ecosystem. It is one of the biggest truths that exists across the planet, and it is at the heart of what would be our long-term success. Can we make a difference, inspire those people around us to use communication to improve outcomes and identify those 1% to make an improvement? And do we need to reconsider the criteria we use to prioritize our markets? Or put in a different way, I'm not saying we need to do more social, I'm not saying we need to do more mobile, I'm certainly not saying we need to do more closed-loop marketing. I'm just suggesting that we need to get better at actually speaking digital. Thank you.